I've got a table here where I want to do some simple transformations. So I have a column with first name and I want to make sure that those are capitalized. I want to do the same thing for last name. And then I want to take this H column, which has a comma, and then I want to remove that. I just want to round that down. And now I have a data type of number, which will save memory. And since these steps are so simple, I want to have them in one single step. So instead of having two steps here, I just want to have one step that does everything at the same time. So this could be relevant if you have to do a lot of these small actions. So it would be nice if I could just go ahead and make a new step where I say that I want to copy this action, where I capitalize each word, and I simply say I want that, and I'm acting on the change type step. And then I also want, using the ampersand, I also want this rounded down step, where I will then have to make sure that I change what table I'm acting on, because now I'm not acting on the capitalized each word step, I'm acting on the change type step. And what will happen if I try to do this is Power Query is going to be a bit confused, because right now you'll notice that I have actually doubled my rows. So I'm doing what I want to do here in the first 3 rows. I'm capitalizing the words on both columns, but then in the last 3 rows I'm not doing anything. And in the first 3 rows I haven't done anything to my numbers, but I have done it in the last 3 rows. And what's happening here is that basically Power Query is confused and it's trying to do changes, but these 2 steps are independent of one another. So it's the opposite of what I want to do. So half of my rows are correct in the first 2 columns and half of my rows are correct in the 3rd column. And that's not what I want to do. And the trick to chain these 2 actions together is found in the word table. The table.transform columns and also the table.add columns, in case you wanted to do that, they take an argument of a table. And normally these functions would take a step, the prior step, as the argument, but you can pass in a normal table. In this case, a table function also produces an output of a table. And I'm going to use that to chain these 2 functions together, because I don't have to have my function refer to the last step of change type. I can actually change this argument here and make that a table that I'm creating on the fly. So I can chain the 2 functions together by saying that this first function should take this table as its argument. So if I delete this, or rather copy paste it, then I'm going to make an empty line. Here where I say change type, which is a table, I can replace that with my table.transform columns function. And that returns a table. This whole inner function looks at this table and turns that into a new table, which is then used by this function. And then it's mad at me because I have this ampersand. So now what's going on is that inside the function, I'm creating this new table where I do my transformation, where I turn the H column into int 64 type, so a normal number, by rounding the number down, because that's how ages work. If you're 16.9 years old, you're still 16 years. And then that inner table will get used in my outer function to convert that. You could do this with many functions and just keep chaining them together and together, but it quickly becomes difficult to understand what's going on. So I would only ever do this method if you really have some simple functions. So you really just need to do something as simple as making the cases proper, or rounding or changing type, because it's just going to be messy to understand later on. But if you really care about having as few steps as possible, then you can do this function, this chaining functions, because now I can remove these 2 steps, which means I went from a 4-step query to a 3-step query. So again, this is an option if you really want to. I had a work case where I needed to add 3 columns and all 3 columns had to be empty. So I really just needed a header because this was used later downstream, not for something I needed. And having 3 steps where I'm adding a blank column, that's kind of silly. So if I knew what I know now, I would do this. So I have 1 step where I just say, I'm adding these 3 empty columns, and then I would have 1 step instead of 3. So yeah,